And joining us now to take a look at the weather here for the week ahead as we move our way out of October, Eric Snodgrass with Nutria joins us here today. Eric, good to catch up with you, sir. And this Halloween, it doesn't feel like there's anything too spooky in that forecast to start us off for the week here, Eric.
Yeah, but if you were to push this Halloween back about a week, then we'd be talking about some spooky stuff. And you're right. There's going to be some folks across the midsection of the country that just maintain, decent harvest windows. We got some rain moving through the eastern Corn Belt now, and that's going to head on off to the northeast. But if you're in the western Corn Belt, parts of the central Corn Belt, we've got very warm conditions. I'm talking like 30 degrees above normal coming through the middle of this week. It's going to be dry, but that's all set up, right? We always know to expect that when we get such a drastic swing one direction, that more than likely the atmosphere is going to retaliate and go the other way. In fact, my daughter right now in school is learning Newton's 3 laws. And so there's that one, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. And so I think it's one of those things where we're just preparing for a pretty significant shift across the West, and it's going to translate into the midsection of the country very soon.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit. We're looking at that pattern change. Farmers are rapidly trying to wrap up harvest. When are those harvest windows really going to start closing up for us here, Eric?
Yeah, so for a lot of folks from like Texas through Arkansas, Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, and getting up toward Michigan, they feel like they've tightened up a bit already. And that's where we had some decent rain. And some of that rain's trying to get its way into the tributaries that feed the Mississippi. But I was looking right now, the Mississippi came up about 3 feet in Memphis. It still has another 12 feet to go to get back to low stage. So we need to see quite a bit more precip. Now, if you're in the Western Corn Belt, the Northern Plains, you've got time. You've got another week to really get things out before I think it really starts to close up tight, maybe next Sunday into Monday. So what's happening right now is that the momentum in the Pacific jet stream is just piling into the Pacific Northwest. That's going to bring some snow into Northern California, some rain into California. So the Sierra Nevada will pick up some snow. The Cascades will pick up some snow. The Northern Rockies will pick up some snow. And our friends in Canada, from like southern Alberta through central Saskatchewan into north central Manitoba, have the chances of picking up a lot of snow. So that's kind of the tell there, right? I mean, if the atmosphere is ready to do that to the west, we're going to initially start off with a lot of warm conditions, and then dive quickly into what's going to feel more like a fall pattern. So if there's work to get done and you've got a window, take advantage of it because things are going to tighten up. And I think the most important thing is going to be the moisture that could return later this week to the southern plains and central plains, and that'll eventually work its way into the western Corn Belt and upper Midwest. What's good about this is that we will see a system emerge late this week into Texas, and that's going to draw moisture possibly into central Oklahoma and Kansas and even the corner of Nebraska. And we need rain there on that hard winter wheat crop. What I don't like is the risk of severe storms with this next system coming through. So unfortunately, that's how you often break a pattern, right? With something kind of on the tail end of the distribution. And I'm worried about some severe weather coming into parts of the Central Plains Friday, Saturday.
Well, thinking about this pattern change, we got to think about La Nina as well. What's kind of the latest you're seeing on La Nina? Where is this going to go as we head into the winter months, Eric?
Yeah, so La Nina is the dominant teleconnection right now, and it's really got a hold on where the MJO is going. And what all that means is troughs in the Gulf of Alaska. That keeps our pattern open and moving, gives the West decent early season precipitation. But the question is, where is it all going? I see La Nina being the dominant teleconnection through November, possibly through parts of of December. But I'm not convinced it hangs on as the dominant teleconnection once we start the new year. There's just mounting evidence that it's going to fade. And once it fades, all of these subseasonal things take over. And when that occurs, then the pattern really has this, it bounces around a lot, which means we could be set up for a pretty volatile winter. There is good news with all of that, though. The likelihood of us reducing the total drought area in the United States, which in last week's drought monitor hit 84.5%, okay? The likelihood of reducing that drought this winter is high. I see it really kind of getting eaten away at the most important places in the West and in the central part of the United States. And overall, I think we have to look at that and say that this is a benefit of losing this La Nina as we go into this winter. But it's going to really make my job quite hectic when we try to figure out if something we've had for 3 years is finally just going to get out. So we'll be watching it carefully.
Yeah, it's something to watch very, very closely. There's just so much with the drought continuing to expand eastward across the U.S. that I know a change in a pattern in a big way. I think a lot of folks would be happy to see. I know as well, Eric, we're watching South America very closely. Their season is ramping up there and ongoing. What's the latest with what you're seeing down there?
Well, let's start in southern South America, down in Argentina. There's a front that started in like Patagonia, Chile, and it's going to finish late this week, like north of the Amazon. So the whole continent is going to have a front sliding through it. What it did last night was a bit surprising. There was some patchy frost in Buenos Aires. There was some patchy frost over in western Argentina, up in the foothills of the Andes. And I was expecting more of a frost risk tomorrow morning. But if you look at the precipitation, it's clearing things out. It's going to be drier, and that's going to make the drought issues in Argentina last. Now, the drier week ahead or 10 days ahead, that's for like northern growing areas in Brazil, like Mato Grosso. I'm not concerned about that. They're way ahead of their planting pace, about 20% ahead of the 5-year average, matching last year's pace, and they're going to get the crop finished. What I'm thinking about, though, is I heard some reports suggest that the total acreage that went into the first crop, so mostly that's soybeans, some of it is corn, but this year there's a greater percentage that went into soybeans. And what that means is if we lose La Nina and start to build in drought risk for the safrinha crop, that safrinha crop could be larger in terms of its normal percentages, which means more corn. So we've got to watch that carefully because it could be an issue that we'll be talking about next February, March, and April.
Eric, I know as well we're watching other global weather factors. I know you're keeping an eye on Australia and the issues there. And then you also mentioned to me before we went on the air, talk of worries about a cold winter in Europe. What are your thoughts with both those?
Yeah, well, Australia is on the receiving end of any La Nina. So in the month of October, they've had some locations that have picked up 4 to 8 inches of additional rainfall. And that's in like South Australia, Victoria, New South Wales, and Queensland. Those are big ag areas. Western Australia earlier this weekend had a hail event that hit some of their wheat crop. So they need no more rain, and more is coming. Now, you mentioned Europe. Now, Europe is my wild card for this whole winter. And what I mean by that is if we see the North Atlantic cool, we see La Nina let go, and we start to see blocking patterns in the jet stream over Iceland, the east coast of the United States, and then Europe go over to just really cold conditions. Even if Europe has a normal winter, their energy demand, which would be normal, is going to be met with the supply issues. If they have any cold shocks to that, it's something that's just going to ripple across the entire ag industry. So we'll watch that also, because that's kind of frontline on my radar, some of the bigger players in terms of concern. It's drought in the United States and it's cold winter in Europe that I think are the biggest things in the Northern Hemisphere. And then it's Argentinian drought and the potential for safrinha crop issues in South America. So there is no time off in this industry, as you know very well. And therefore, we've got new things to be keeping an eye on.
Well, we will continue to follow closely with you and keep an eye on those things as well, and keep our farmers and ranchers informed. And I know folks can sign up for Eric's daily newsletter on our website, markettalkag.com. And with that, Eric Snodgrass, always a pleasure, sir. Enjoy the rest of your week, and we'll talk to you again next week.
Yeah, sounds good.